The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, was not a sudden decision but the result of years of growing tension between Japan and the United States. Japan's expansionist ambitions, resource shortages, and strategic concerns all played key roles in its decision to go to war with America. 1. Japan's expansion and the need for resources. By the late 1930s, Japan was aggressively expanding across Asia. The invasion of Manchuria, 1931, and the full-scale Sino-Japanese War, 1937, placed a heavy burden on Japan's economy. As a resource-poor nation, Japan relied on imports, especially oil, steel, and rubber, to sustain its military campaigns. However, these key resources were largely controlled by Western powers, including the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands. 2. U.S. economic sanctions and the oil embargo. The United States opposed Japan's conquests in China and, in response, imposed economic sanctions throughout the 1930s. After Japan occupied French Indochina, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, in 1940, the U.S. escalated its response by freezing Japanese assets and, most critically, cutting off oil exports in July 1941. This oil embargo was a severe blow, as Japan imported 80% of its oil from the U.S. Without oil, Japan's military and economy would collapse within months. 3. The decision to expand southward. Faced with an economic crisis, Japan saw two options: withdraw from China and Indochina, which would restore trade but be seen as a humiliating defeat. Seize resource-rich territories in Southeast Asia, such as the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, which had vast oil reserves. Japan chose the second option, but this meant confronting the U.S., as American forces controlled the Philippines and had a strong naval presence in the Pacific. 4. The threat of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The U.S. Pacific Fleet, based at Pearl Harbor, was the biggest obstacle to Japan's southward expansion. Japanese military planners believed that if the U.S. Navy was left intact, it could block Japan's access to vital resources. The solution was to launch a surprise attack, crippling American naval power and giving Japan free rein to expand. 5. Japan's miscalculation and the road to war. Japan's leaders hoped that by destroying the U.S. fleet, America would lose the will to fight and agree to negotiate. However, this was a massive miscalculation. Instead of forcing the U.S. into submission, the attack on Pearl Harbor united the American public and led to a full-scale war. On December 8, 1941, the United States declared war on Japan, marking the official start of the Pacific War. Japan's decision to attack America was driven by economic desperation, military strategy, and a desire to secure resources. While Japanese leaders believed a quick strike could force the U.S. to accept their expansion, the attack on Pearl Harbor had the opposite effect, leading to a prolonged and devastating war that ultimately resulted in Japan's defeat.